Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I'm Coach Kim, and today's podcast is not a workout. If you're looking for a workout, go to the other channel that we have called Muscle Maintenance. This is where I get to talk about fitness concepts and tell stories about fitness throughout history, which I love to do. It's an interesting combination being an exercise coach that is a total fitness history buff. And I don't mean fitness history specifically. I just mean history. I read nonfiction books and draw out sort of components of the physical selves of people all the time. In fact, I was just reading a story last night. It's a love story between Voltaire and his lover of some many years named Amélie du Châtelet, and their exercise regimen in a castle or a chateau that they prepared for mostly science and philosophical discussions and get-togethers. But the hiking and the gardening that they did was the exercise that they took. So I love telling stories about that because I just don't buy into the American consumer retail-driven sort of paradigm that we've got to go to the gym, that we've got to use a piece of equipment, that we've got to set aside a specific amount of time and space in our calendar to consume exercise like we do everything else in our modern lives. And I was having a conversation just this morning with one of my clients that made me realize that there is something that I do talk about sort of regularly, but it's an issue that bears repeating. Being a broken record is sometimes really healthy, which is why people exercise a couple times a week. Like why that sort of notion of going to the gym or doing a yoga class or whatever 2 or 3 times a week, why we think that is sufficient in terms of our physical lives, our physical health, the sustainability over the long term with your weight management, your ability to function without pain and suffering or medications, and to be able to enjoy the things that you want to do without fatigue and pain. And this issue, which came up this morning with my client, was about going to exercise with me because we run together, but then also wanting to go to a yoga session, and that is sort of contraindicated to what I was saying to her, which is you don't really need to go to the yoga studio if you build flexibility work into a routine that you adapt every single day in the evening. I tell everyone to stretch at night. I stretch at night. I don't do a ton of stretching. I don't spend a half an hour, in various yoga poses, but I do end every single evening with myself flat out on the living room floor, which is where I also start the day with my morning routine. And I take about 5 minutes to hug my knees, to stretch my IT band, to sit and stretch out my hamstrings, to get into downward facing dog, to stretch out my butt a little bit more. Those are things that are really easy to do. It doesn't require anything fancy in terms of a membership or in terms of special clothes or in terms of special equipment. It is simply a piece of time in your day that you have to commit to, of course. So that's a big problem. And talking about time is something we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes as I go through the rest of the story. But the sort of simplicity of it is almost unnerving, I think, for a lot of the people that I talk to. So anyway, so we're going to start today with a conversation about why in the United States we have this sense that exercising once or twice a week is like the minimum. Exercising 3 times a week or maybe 4 times a week is ideal. And then there's like the sort of overdoing it and maybe obsessive sort of thing with people that exercise 5 or 6 times a week or even 7 times a week. Sometimes I know people that are that kind of obsessed and potentially to not a great degree. They spend too much of their time in fitness experiences. to the detriment of the actual health of the body, like overworking the body and not resting enough. But let's lay some blame where it deserved. It is deserved, right? So, and a lot of things are this way in our country right now. And you might also know that I'm a little bit political. So I'm gonna lay this blame at the feet of the United States government, and governments in general, I guess, state governments, local governments, whatever, but mostly the government in the national sphere is really where this lies, because they make those physical fitness recommendations that are then adopted by medical professionals, which are then conveyed to patients, which are then adopted in people's homes. Okay, so let's just go through that again. We have a government with an agency that makes health recommendations, which are sort of adapted and conveyed to patients through medical doctors. And then there's companies. So I'm going to talk about companies separately in a second. And then those patients translate that which they learn from their doctors into their homes and into their daily habits, their practices within their homes. And we've got to get through the change from that as soon as we possibly can, because of the relationship that companies and governments have now, largely. But just to go back, because I am a history buff, I'm going to go through the history a little bit because I love this. I find it so fascinating that 100 years ago, we were all thin. 100 years ago, in the early 20th century, almost all adults and all children were thin, all the way up to the end of World War II. Just 3 generations of Americans have created such a change on such a scale that it is really difficult to wrap our brains around the solutions. Like so many other issues in the United States currently. It is so big, and we have so much to do to unravel it all. But families 100 years ago, roughly, they subsisted on smaller meals, made at home mostly from basic ingredients. They didn't have a ton of excess money to spend a great deal of food, of their money on food, particularly at restaurants, out all the time. Now, eating on the go has become part of our culture, and there it is. But we didn't 100 years ago. We just didn't snack all day. We didn't have something to eat all the time around us. And if we were, that first initial hunger pain, you should try this. It's actually one of the tricks I try to get my clients to think about. When you develop a hunger pain around lunchtime, maybe, or first thing in the morning, think about it for 20 minutes before you act on it. Think about your hunger before you act on it. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to take for granted here that you're probably not truly hungry, that you're aptly nutrient, fulfilled, that you're able to eat when you want to eat. So just think about the hunger when you get hungry. Don't pop into the next convenience store, deli, coffee shop, whatever, at the slightest hunger pain. It's interesting because we all do this now. People that drive in their cars that get hungry, they stop at the next drive-thru. In New York City, where I live, feel a hunger pain, you slip into the next snack shop of some sort. Grab a muffin, grab a bar, grab a shake, grab a whatever. Now, that's the food part. And I don't talk about food very much. You know this. I talk a lot about how I don't talk about food. Today, I just want to get through that part of it because that is a significant component to the changes in our American physicality. But so there's the food part. But on the movement part, people also didn't exercise per se. 100 years ago, there weren't really gyms. There were a few, some, bodybuilding types of facilities. The Olympics, there were athletes and athletic training facilities and sports stadiums, those kinds of things. But people didn't exercise as a consumer experience. They didn't sit around for long periods of time either. Now, they were after World War II, as the Industrial Revolution was ending and we were beginning the sort of technological revolution, there were a lot more people working in offices, and they were starting to sit more. I don't know why just now I thought about the television show Mad Men, but I'm just thinking about the television show Mad Men for some reason. So I'll talk about it for a second. There's this whole like sort of new culture of women entering the workforce, becoming often office assistants, secretaries, and the like. And I remember in this show the sort of jocular conversations about gaining a few pounds if you are grabbing food at the bodega or the snack guy or whatever, eating the cookies and the candies that are left when the special guests come into the office or whatever. But still, most people didn't sit around for really long periods of time, and they walked around when they were not sitting down. They cleaned their own homes. They traveled more on foot. They gardened. I did that podcast last week about yard care, lawn care, and my antique lawnmower in Virginia, which I love. I'm so sad I get back to New York, and then I'm back to my other New York life, which I love, but I do miss mowing my little lawn with my antique lawnmower. In any case, as the United States emerged from World War II, and then this shift started to take place as families moved into suburbs, they purchased more than one vehicle, and they stopped moving by foot quite as much. And then there was the time, and this is kind of where we're coming around to this current period where we are with the kinds of lives we live now, where we hire out for help to do so many of the tasks. Of course, there's our food supply, which is getting worse and worse and worse. So if in some cases there's this diverging construction of the problem, which is making it more complicated, which is that if you're lower income, your access to food is stymied, or access to actual food and healthy food is stymied by cost. But you're doing the things you have to do in your home, but you're eating cheaper food, which is really bad for you. And then on the other hand, there are middle class and upper middle class and affluent people that hire out for absolutely everything. And again, just referencing the kinds of people that tend to listen a lot to podcasts, you're probably somewhere in the middle there. So maybe you don't hire out for everything, but you probably do hire out for some things. I know of very few people, for example, going back to the lawn care thing, that have decent sized yards that do their own yard work full stop anymore. They get help. You get help to get, for childcare and for, in many cases, and this is not hiring out for the help for the person, but we have hired out for our meal preparation. That is a huge deal. And it's not just because it's the crappy food that we're eating. It's also because we're not standing in the kitchen and reaching for things and moving things around and turning around to catch something before it boils over and loading the dishwasher and doing all the stuff that relates to being in your home for a scratch cooked meal. We're not doing that stuff anymore. We have hired out two big companies which are harnessing they're leveraging their power over us and the money that they have to control their messaging, that it's not worth it to take the time to do this. Let them do it for us so that life will be easier. And Now we have babysitters that come over so that the parents can go to the gym. That is really where we've arrived. And I think that's a poignant statement to make to so many people I know. I mean, my daughter is a little bit older now. I have a 10-year-old. So we kind of exercise together. We do a lot of things together. I climbed trees with her last night. I just actually started doing handstands. I have finally been able, it was like a bucket list thing for me. And I have no idea how it ended up on my bucket list. But at 50 years old, which I turned 50 earlier this summer, I decided I wanted to be able to do a handstand. Now, I can only do a handstand against a wall. But I did manage just this week to pull it off. I'm so excited about that. And my 10-year-old is doing them with me. But the fact that babysitters are hired for parents to come so that for parents to go to the gym. Parents hire babysitter comes to a house, parent leaves the house, goes, swipes a membership card to get in a workout at a gym, and then retreats from that consumer experience to come back to the home, pays the babysitter. So you're getting screwed doubly here in some ways. Now, I'm also a parent, so I know that there's a value to the escape for like an adult moment. And I get that totally. I really do. So please don't be mad at me if you have little kids and you want babysitters to come over just so that you can do anything. Just go, walk down the street and sit on a park bench and read for an hour or go to the gym, equally important in my experiences. But what is undeniable is that these willful exercise experiences, what people call workouts, when they swipe the membership card, they go to a place and they do this sort of they conduct their physical bodies in a particular way to burn calories and hopefully get in shape or stay in shape. It really does waste a great deal of time. They often workouts include the selection of exercises that are really not about the sustainability of metabolic processes and, just as importantly, if not more important, the strength of overall function, the sustainability of long-term function. One of the most relevant misconceptions of retail exercise that has evolved in this last 100-year period is the difference between strength work, cardio work. And then there's that thing I was talking about today with my client in terms of flexibility work. So there's the flexibility component that is a trinity, and it is really, really important. There's endurance, cardiovascular effort, aerobic exercise, and there is muscle movement, the building of strength or the maintaining of strength. And then there's the range about the joints of your body that allows your body to function the way it's supposed to. And that is flexibility. An exercise expert at like a gym, but let's just go back to like the 1980s or 1990s, would have probably suggested to a client to go and, spend somewhere between like 15 and 20, maybe 30 minutes on a bike or a treadmill, a cardio machine. What a silly sort of concept I think that is. And then take a trip around the weight machine for the strength workout part. Do this 3 times a week, or 4 or 5 if you've got to lose weight. All right. But elevating the heart rate, as important as it is, doesn't have to be on a cardio machine. It really doesn't have to be much of anything other than knowing what your heart rate is, elevating your heart rate throughout periods of time throughout your day to an elevated rate. And then making sure that you incorporate those kinds of activities in every day of your life. Now, if you like to cycle or jog or swim or whatever, these are elevated heart rate activities naturally that you can do, and your heart will likely stay strong. Your respiratory and circulatory systems are likely going to maintain that level of endurance over longer periods of time if you're doing those things naturally. But hiking, particularly up and down hills, taking stairs, and interacting with gravity, which is a different podcast. I'll maybe include that in a podcast again here in the very near future. But the cardio machine itself is not really designed to be this panacea of your aerobic exercise. And one of the main reasons that it's kind of a double-edged sword is that people tend to get on these machines, and then what happens? They get hungry, and then they eat all the benefits away from what they've just done. And you've lost the time, and you've spent the money. Now, Americans believe that they need weights and machines and equipment to do this work. Dragging yourself to the gym to get done, which you just simply are, for whatever reason, not willing to do in your home. And I know that is the single biggest challenge that I have as a professional in this space. It is a constant experiment and like spaghetti at the wall kind of process and it's different for everybody, to suggest a few exercises, to text a reminder, to ping a picture of a position in order to try and get people to interact with their bodies during their lives as a function of the improvement of life in a multifaceted way. But please remember that at the end of the day, the consumer-based exercise sort of standards that we think we have are fictional. We've created them. Our government has perpetuated them. Our companies are making money off of them. And regular people are just trying to keep up. And given the statistics, we're not doing a very good job at that. I'm Coach Kim from In Shape Fitness. I'll be back next week with another podcast. And also, of course, I'll be recording another a workout podcast at the beginning of the week on our other channel, which is called Muscle Maintenance. Have a great day and get in touch if you need anything from me and my team.